Okay, so I've talked a little bit about some broad concepts that sound designers use and interact with on a daily basis when they're going in to create some sort of sound design for the play. Talked a little bit about diegesis, imaging, musicals, music, and we know that sound design is not just the music of the play, though composition is definitely part of the design. Sometimes those jobs are split, sometimes they're the same person. It really depends on what the play calls for and what the play is. But one thing that always comes into account when you're talking about sound design for the theater is acoustics. So this is a little bit more of the technical section, but this all contributes to what sound designers think about when they're going in to create the world of the play through sound design. So sound at its most basic level is a pressure wave. It is the air vibrating back and forth from a sound in areas of high pressure and low pressure. So we often think about this as, it's basically the math section or the physics section that you had in school that's simple harmonic motion. And we think of it in different frequencies. How many of those pressure waves are passing a fixed point in time, usually your ear, determines the literal frequency of the sound. And humans experience this as high-pitched sound or low-pitched sound. So a lower frequency would sound like a lower sound, and a higher frequency, more pressure waves passing your eardrum at any given moment would be perceived as a high frequency. And that's when we talk about psychoacoustics, the human ear is an imperfect organ. It does not perceive all sounds in the same way. The human ear actually has a bias where it hears low frequency sounds and certain sections around 5-6 kilohertz and upwards, where it actually is much more sensitive to those frequencies than other frequencies at all. And when you go in to create a system, and when we go into a space, whether it's more reverberant, whether it's a grand cathedral hall or a theater or a sound stage or a small studio, this really affects how people perceive the space. Because we don't hear sound linearly from all measures of the frequency spectrum, sound designers have to play around with this, and oftentimes that comes into view with compensation, how loud the system sounds in different parts, and that's all very technical. But at its core, sound is just a pressure wave that we experience in terms of frequency. Now, you may be thinking to yourself, right, if we only hear a difference of frequency in different sounds, right? If you're musically inclined, middle C is just a specific frequency. Why does middle C in a piano sound different from when someone's singing middle C? And why does my voice sound a certain way compared to someone else's voice? Well, that actually has a lot to do with overtones. Overtones are a musical concept where it's actually no specific note that you're hearing is just one pure note, right? If I were to hear a pure C note, I'll actually play that now. It sounds very mechanical, and it's a synth, right? At its core, that's what synths are. They're just a very rudimentary form of a frequency wave. But when you're actually speaking, you're speaking with a lot of overtones, and what that is, it's a harmonic series above a fundamental note that is heard at the same time. So when someone sings a C, they're actually singing, they're actually vibrating their vocal cords in a way that the chief note that you're hearing is that bass frequency, but your vocal cords and your throat actually change the way that the sound is heard, and chiefly your tongue to phonate, chiefly your tongue to change the way that those overtones are, so that an E, a sung E, sounds different than a sung A, or a sung A, or a sung O, or any one of those vowels. And it manipulates how loud those overtones are in a series, in a group basically, above the fundamental note. And that's why a piano sounds different than a violin playing the same note. The physical characteristics of a piano and the way in which they make sound changes the emphasis of different overtones above the fundamental note, which is what gives different instruments, their timbre, their quality. One of the other things about sound being a pressure wave that is really important to know is that sound drops off according to the inverse square law, which basically just means that the intensity of sound decreases the farther away you get from it, and it's proportional to the distance. So the farther away you get, the quieter the sound literally is. And this is basically why you're supposed to be close to the mic. The sound is more intense up close because as a single point source radiates sounds, it spreads out, which thus decreases the intensity at a single point the farther away you get. Because it's also a pressure wave, sound travels at different speeds through different mediums. Again, this is something that sound designers play around with. Hotter air makes sound travel at a different speed than cold air because cold air is more dense. Denser mediums change the quality of sound, which is why we're able to play around with, a hot summer day feeling and sounding different than the dead of winter, and the appropriate acoustic manipulation that goes along with it. If a sound designer wanted to make it sound like music is coming from underwater, there's a specific set of qualities that they change about that musical track that make it sound that at its core are just changing the way that the sound interacts to basically filter it so it sounds like it's underwater. And the last most important part about acoustics as we think about it for the theater is that waves reflect, right? If waves hit up a hard surface, they will reverberate, they will echo back, and those reverb and echo are essentially the same thing. Echo is just a distinct reflection of that exact sound back, often having to do with the scope and size of the space, and it is nicely packaged, in other words. And reverb is basically just those reflections, but really quickly and really close together, so it's basically nondescript. It's more of a wash. The reverb is basically why different spaces sound different. The reverb is characteristically what would make a cathedral sound different than a small studio space, because the amount of reverb, the amount of sound reflected back into the space, and what frequencies it's reflecting back into the space changes with the medium. If it's concrete, if it's wood, if it's plaster, those things all take different frequencies, and depending on the size and depending on the fundamental reverberant frequency of the room will change the quality of the sound that you hear if you present something in there. And sound designers know this, and they use this to help the set design. If the set design is a cathedral, they'll probably make everything sound like it's a cathedral. If the sound design is if the play is supposed to be in a small studio space, they're going to change the quality of the sound being heard so that it probably sounds like it's coming from a small studio space. We can inform the action with the physical properties of sound. So I hope this was a neat little, broad overview of sound design. It's by no means comprehensive, and a lot of this is just me talking. Thanks all, and have a good day.